Hey everyone! Today we're doing something I haven't done in a while on my channel, which is firstly, we're going to be knitting, secondly, we're going to do a diary out of it, and thirdly, it's going to be Doctor Who related. So, throwback to way back when I made the Tom Baker scarf. Because I thought, firstly, I really want to make myself something. And secondly, that video of me knitting the Tom Baker scarf is still getting so many views you wouldn't believe. So I'm like, hey, I want to make this. People want to see it. Let's make it a video. What we are doing is we're going to knit a TARDIS jumper. I've knitted 3 jumpers before. One of them is a rainbow crop top kind of situation with half-long sleeves. One of them is a full-sized jumper in a tealy kind of blue color, which turned out to be exactly the color of my eyes. And the very first jumper I ever knitted it's not great. It's really bad. The very first time I tried knitting a jumper, I thought I would use very bulky yarn because I wanted to be finished very quickly, and that was not a good plan. It just looks horrible. So this time I have some 4 to 4.5 millimeter yarn. Now normally I would be using TARDIS blue yarn for this. Ooh, sun. Hello. But I don't have enough to make a jumper, and the store that I get my yarn from is out of stock. So I got this instead. I really like it. It's just gonna be a very light TARDIS jumper, and I kind of like that because lighter wool is easier to work with. I haven't opened this up. I have 2 of them. They're 300 grams each. On the packaging it says that you need 600 grams for a size M jumper. Let's hope that that means it'll fit me. We're going to try and find the beginning. If you've never tried that, there is a link to a video up there where I'm showing how to get the beginning out of one of those center pull balls of yarn. Now this is going to be a bit different because in this video we're going to focus more on me and the technique I'm using and the around stuff rather than how exactly the stitches are made, because every single thing I'm doing there's going to be a link up there to how to do it. 4.5, so we're going to use a 4mm needle. This is a 4mm circular needle of 50 centimeters. We're going to use that to start off with the color. The first good one I made, which is the one that is the color of my eyes, I used 80 stitches around, which is just as much as I use for my hats, because my mom said if it fits around my head then it's gonna fit over my head. However, I noticed that around my neck, like to get it around, it's kind of hard. So what I'm gonna be doing is instead of 80, I'm going for 100 stitches, which means that I'm gonna have 4 times 25 stitches. I'm gonna use a bit of the yarn, like small pieces, and tie them into loops like that, just with a little knot at the end, because counting to 100 without missing, like losing count, is a challenge. So I'm just gonna be counting to 25, put in a stitch marker, and start again. So I need 3 of those. I'm gonna take my circular needles and take them just like this. So this is where the nylon bit is, and both needles are next to each other. And I'm gonna do my cast on. I'm gonna make sure to leave sufficient amount of tail, because what's too much I can always sew in later. If it's too little I have to start over, so make sure there's enough tail. I don't know how much enough is, just make sure there's a ton of tail. I have this much tail right now, so that should do it. So I'm just going to cast on 25 stitches and then put in a stitch marker and do that 4 times. So one set of 25 is done. I'm just going to slip that stitch marker over here and then keep going. If you don't know how to do this kind of traditional cast on, or any kind of cast on actually, there is a link up there to my VEDs from I think 2 years ago, where I did tutorials on all the kinds of cast on that I know. So check out that if you don't know how to do a cast on, and then you can come back here. Remember, 100 stitches. You need 100 stitches, 25 times 4. Okay, I've got 100 stitches here, and I still have a ton of tail, so you don't need as much as I showed you. Now, the trickiest part about knitting with circular needles and knitting a jumper, in my opinion, is this next part, because since we needed the cast on stitches to be stretched out enough to work with them so it's not too tight, we used both needles, right? Except now we have to take one of them out without the other one dropping out. That's the hard part. So naturally, when you're doing the cast on, at some point one of the needles should be falling back from pushing it against your thumb or something. I don't know what exactly makes it happen, but it does happen. So I'm just going to grab the one that is further out and grab the end of nylon loop that is sticking out and try and pull the other one to the back, which is tricky, very tricky. There we go. You need a bit of strength, and you need to regulate your strength so that you don't just pull out both needles of the stitches. So to make things easier, so that we don't twist it in a way that we can't untwist it again, to make it a little longer, because right now it's like not even half as long as the circular needle, what we're going to do is we're going to knit one row just back to where we started, and we're going to do 2 knit 2 purl, because I like having a ribbed color, so that's what we're going to do. The 2 videos in the corner up above, one of them is on how to do a simple knit stitch, the other one on how to do a simple purl stitch, and there's one on how to connect something into a round. You can come back when you're done with that round, with that row. Okay, so I've reached half of it. I've reached my second marker here, and I realized, do you even know what to do with the marker? I haven't said that, have I? Ever, I think. So what you're doing is just do the last stitch before the marker and then just slide the marker over to the other needle, because we're gonna need that marker later to decide where we're gonna do the increases to make the raglan. Keep the stitch markers there for the ribbing. So I have done my first row completely. Now if you started off with knit 2 and you didn't miscount at cast on, then you should have ended on purl 2. If you haven't, then you might have miscounted. Don't worry about it too much. You won't really be able to tell that much. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect both ends. Instead of going back, we're just gonna start connecting both ends of it by just continuing to knit in a round. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna keep doing the whole knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 for about 5 to 6 rows. You can do 10 rows if you fancy. You could also do like 30 rows or something and make it like a turtleneck kind of situation. Now you're gonna end up with a pretty big gap in between where you connected both ends of your knitting. That's a fairly big gap here. Don't worry about that. It's gonna close up as you keep doing rounds, which is why I like 4 to 5 rounds for the color, because I feel like that's a solid number of rows to close up that gap. If you do more, fine. If you do less, you're gonna be able to sew up that gap later on. I'd say like 4 or 5 rows are like the minimum to close up that gap. Okay, so I have just purled my very last stitch. I have made 5 rows of knit 2, purl 2, and that's what I'm going with. My gap is pretty much invisible now, save for the tail hanging out of it. But what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start doing our plain knit rounds with the increases to make it into a jumper and not just a tube. You have your 3 stitch markers, which mark 3 of the points where you're going to do your increases. The 4th one is right here where your tail is, where the gap was for earlier. Now I think I've done that in one of the videos. If so, I'll put it up there. What you're going to do is, after that last purl stitch, you're going to yarn over your needle, knit that first stitch, yarn over again, and knit the next stitch, which means that now you have 2 more stitches on your needle, and you're gonna keep just knitting all the stitches until you reach your stitch marker. Then slide over you can get rid of the stitch marker at this point until you reach the stitch marker, and after the stitch marker, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and do that all the way around for 1 row. After that, you're gonna do 1 row of just knitting, and I'm gonna show you what that looks like. Okay, I've reached the end of my row, which means that the next stitch waiting for me is the yarn over one, and I'm just gonna knit that like it's a normal stitch, then knit that one in the middle, knit the other yarn over, and then just keep knitting for the whole row, which essentially is going to create 2 little holes like this that are slightly visible. So essentially it makes these 2 holes, and what you're going to do is you're going to keep knitting for the whole row, and then that middle stitch is going to keep being your middle stitch for the increases, and you're going to alternate 1 row of just knitting everything and 1 row of making 2 yarn overs on each sides of that middle stitch, if that makes sense. I'm gonna show you again when I'm a little further. Okay, so I'm nearly again at the point where the increases are, which is like the end of my row. See how the end is sticking out here? And now I have the increase from that other moment. And you can see that middle stitch here, so I'm going to knit that one like a normal stitch. I'm going to make a new yarn over, knit this one, new yarn over, and knit this one. So this here is going to keep being our middle post for the ends, and it's going to be visible later on. Basically, this little post that I just showed you is gonna run like that. So you're gonna keep doing this, knit 1 row and then do 1 row with increases, then just knitting, then increases, just knitting, increases, until, okay, so you're gonna take a tape measure and measure from here where the color is gonna start all the way to the middle of your armpit, and that's how long you need that line of middle stitches to be for your jumper to fit. Maybe make it a little longer, like 1/2 centimeter longer, just so that you have liberty to do this kind of stuff. So that's what I'm gonna do now off camera. I'm starting to have a lot of stitches on my needle. As you can see, this is coming a little bit scrunchier now. When you have that and it feels like you're running out of space on your needle, just swap to a longer needle. To swap needles, what you're doing is just you're taking your new needle. As you can see, the hard bits of this one are much longer, which is going to be much nicer to work with, and you're gonna, that needle where your yarn is coming out, the left right one, you're just going to pull that out a little so nothing happens to it. And you're going to take the new one and just keep on knitting with that one until your whole work is on that new needle, basically. So do that. Do your rows of increases knitting, increases knitting, increase knit. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my veg, then please subscribe to my channel or watch that playlist to see all of my veg this month. And I will see you again tomorrow. Bye!